Okay, welcome to What's the Story of Our History. I'm Chris Pereira, your host with the fellow co-host Shari and Avtar. So, What's the story of our history started? I think it's a very brief conversation with a common friend we have on why not start something that tells the story of our history from a very neutral perspective, very independent perspective. So me, Chris Pereira, I'm a non-historian, unless it's music lah. So this is out of my field. So I'm literally the clueless guy who's trying to understand our history. So I have a background of music production, photography, videography. So that's how this kind of all came about. I do podcasts as well. So to make things less awkward, I'm gonna let Shari talk about who he is and why he's here. Shari.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome, Avtar. Okay, just want to let you know, my name is Shari Jeffri. I'm a banker by profession, but again, history is always in my blood. I love history so much. I'm very passionate about history. Reason being, I grew up from a family who love to share stories about our historical past. I was raised up by my grandparents in Sembulan, and then they are talking about, I remember as early as like 6 years to 7 years, the first story that they shared to me is about Ong Sung Ping and the dragons in Mount Kinabalu. So I grew up like knowing a lot of local story, and of course, when I was like 10 or 11 years old, my grandfather asked me to copy a name list of the kampung people. So I asked my grandfather, where you want me to copy from? No. You just get pen and book and a pencil, because back then I think these old people they like to memorize. So I was thinking like he wanted me to just write down 10 people's name or 20 or 30 people. So to my surprise, when I write down the name of people that he could remember, he goes by the hundreds. And he never stopped. He just say, okay, this kampung, I will open up by our ancestor, that this is the name of our ancestor, and this is the ancestor's children, and they're married to who, and we are connected. Our family are from like Kota Belut lah, and from Tampasuk, from Ambong, from Kota Marudu to Mengkabung. So he told me basically, without realizing it, the early history of West Coast.
How long did it take to write all that?
Why? That write up alone is a couple of hours. Back then, TV was black and white. So to me, writing that story is already fascinating. I mean, the name, because back in the 70s and the 80s, you don't have much entertainment,
In a few hours, so he basically remembered everything in one sitting.
In one sitting. Then I asked him, why did you choose me? Why you choose me to, write this name? They say, when you were born, you have certain sign. Or certain sign that actually qualify you to become our, they call it pemegang amanah. Pemegang amanah is like custodian.
What was the signs?
The sign was actually, after my elder brother, I got a brother of which passed away. Then I'm in the middle. I'm supposed to be on the third, on the sibling. Then after me, I got another brother, of which also passed away. Then this is very unique situation, but in our community, in our social heritage, they call it impit bangkai.
Oh wow! Literally,
impit bangkai mean two person sacrificed their life in order for me to become who I am So I have that characteristic So they say people like me always have protection. They say I got double bodyguard, which is my two siblings who passed away before and after me. Then my mother cannot deliver a baby until few years down the road. So the gap between me and my younger siblings are actually quite far. The interesting aspect about my grandfather, he was born in 1905.
Okay.
So when he shared me the story, he's already like 80 over years old, and
1905.
he was known in Sembulan as one of the elders of Sembulan. And then I tell you, back then it's not easy to get the names of your elders. That is pantang. You cannot get the name of your father, your grandfather. You cannot get because they only call kampung name lah. Like my grandfather, his actual name is Muhammad Asi bin Asin, but kampung people call him Embok Bilis. Bilis is the kind of small fish, so they call him Embok Bilis. So this is a lot of aspect of history which is very fascinating. And then my grandfather shared to me he's the last custodian of the family. So meaning he's the last one who actually knew who's the name of the founder of Sembulan,
Wait, and he remembered all of this in his just by memory.
I shared to a few people how these elder people have this elephant memories, So they told me these elder people back then they memorize even reading the Quran, they memorize it. They don't actually they actually memorize the Quran. It's like the Tafiz, so they can read hundreds or even thousands of lines of written Quranic verses, and then they remember it. Same goes family line. They know, they can correct me. Okay, Shari, that's uncle, that uncle, how they're related. And he can go. I'm a sixth direct descendant from the founder of Sembulan, So, okay, this is the interesting aspect. Because I started history from family history. So family history to me is very important because that's the root of my existence, And then I'm quite fair, when I grew up in Sembulan community, I need to share a little bit of a story. My elder brother is a bit darker.
Sembulan, what year was this?
This is the early 70s.
Sembulan, early 70s.
So when I came in, my cousins are all on the darker side. I'm on the fair side. So they thought that I'm a Chinese sesat guy, from somewhere and walk into the kampung lah, So to make the story short, I was not really initially accepted by my cousins. They consider me as an outsider. Probably look like a little bit of Japanese, and then Japan attacked Sembulan, during the bombardment and whatnot. So I asked my grandmother. I stopped playing with the children, my cousins. So I asked my grandmother why I'm fair color skin compared to the rest. Then my grandmother told me a story that we are coming from a very diverse mixed heritage of Bruneian, of Bajau Sama, of Kadazan, and of Chinese. That's this way. The first time I start to think, wow, how unique it was, how to live in that kind. And then our family background also, my grandparents, they are multilingual. They can speak Bruneian, they can speak Bajau Sama, they can speak Kadazan. So if somebody come to the house and talk to them, they cannot distinguish whether they are Bruneian or they are Bajau or they are Kadazan, because they can speak all three languages.
Did that get passed down to you?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about all these three languages. I'm multilingual as well.
Just to sidetrack a bit, right? Was Sembulan the same size it was before as it is now? Or has it grown or shrink?
The original Sembulan was in actually the Sabah State Museum, the current Sabah State Museum.
All right.
And then our family cemetery actually the hill surrounding the Sabah State Museum.
Okay.
So when our ancestor came to Sembulan back in 1700, they opened up a small settlement on top of the hill.
Where the museum is?
Yes, that is. And then around that area is our old cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Still there until today. The only thing is my grandfather removed all the yellow clothing and all those signs because some people put candles and ask for all sort of thing
for the numbers.
For these numbers. Back to family history, that's how I started. Because of course I love my grandparents, they raised me up, so I wanted to give a tribute back to my grandparents. So in order for me to say thank you to them for raise me up to become a person like me today, I need to. I promised them I will write a story
So,
about Sembulan. Yeah.
so have you always been writing or interested about history from when your grandfather told you those names, or?
Yeah, initially I thought it was like story. Is
Folk tales lah.
folk tales lah. I didn't really realize that whatever story that they told me actually true.
Oh.
I only realized after I work in a bank where I have a little bit of money, where I can buy some books of which tell the early history about Sabah lah.
Do you remember what those books were?
Yeah, actually very. This is to all Sabah people or to anybody who would love Sabah history. There are a few books which is I consider pillar of the early history of Sabah lah. Book written by Tregening. Book written by the author is Tarling, by Owen Ruther, Ian Black, of course D.S. Ranjit Singh. So this is the early book which is quite important. Actually, I only have these 5 books. I already so happy that I already know the early history of Sabah.
Were those books easy to find, or did you have to like get it online? Or
Back then, in the early 80s, there's no online yet. So, and then this Ranjit also was a later edition. Actually, I bought the Tregening, Tarling, and Ian Black and Owen Ruther. So this is the 4 earlier book that I read. Of course, I need to read again and again and again. And to my disappointment, they didn't really mention about Sembulan history lah.
So it's very like vague, open Sabah history.
Yeah, Sabah. They mentioned Sriwijaya, they mentioned Majapahit, but they didn't really mention Sembulan lah. So I'm a bit disappointed. Then I start thinking whether my grandparents telling me the actual story, but all I know that my grandparents are decent people. They would never lie to young kids and young children. So I did further research lah. That is a quest for 40 years.
What year was that when you did the further research?
It's a quest for 40 years lah. So earlier on, I walked to the Sabah State Library from Sembulan. Just walk. And then I will try to read as much history book, geography book, anthropology book, a book with regards to archaeology, anything about Borneo history lah. I want to know about the early history of Sembulan lah. Then I also walk from Sembulan to the Sabah State Archive.
The archive, wait, is now still the same building?
Yes. Then I try to dig more information about Sembulan. I still remember the first reaction when I came in. I asked them, can you give me all the information about Sembulan? No. You just go to the index, fill up the form, and you look for yourself. That's what the Sabah State Archive asked me to do. But I mean, I did really appreciate. Another organization that actually helped me from the very beginning is the Sabah Society.
Sabah Society.
Why? Because they have this journal on a yearly basis, of which that journal mostly are for members lah. I got hold of one or two of them, and I try to collect most of them because I found that a lot of information in the book of Sabah Society does not actually exist in other books,
publications.
Other publications.
How did you find out about Sabah Society?
I found out Sabah.
Because this was the 80s, right?
Yeah, this is because Sabah Society already exists as early as in 1960s. Because then Sabah Society is one of the organization who actually recommended to the formation of the Sabah State Museum. So they are Sabah Society actually back then in the early 60s is one of the elite society in Malaysia. They in Malaysia. So in terms of getting a lot of local information, I believe the colonial officer, when they came over to Borneo, they are very fascinated about our culture, our heritage, our history, and so much so they write almost a lot of interesting facts about our history. So that is the very beginning, the quest for me to research about Sabah, about Sembulan, and it's not very easy. It's very extremely difficult, extremely challenging, and it's very costly. I cannot afford it. Hence, it took me about 40 years.
The expense was on what side?
Okay, if you go to the Sabah Library or Sabah State Archive, you want to have a copy, then you ask them to copy for you, then you have to start paying them. Like
There's a fee for the printing.
For photocopying.
Oh.
There is another location that I visited, which is the Tun Fat Library, which is in Yayasan Sabah. That is a very good resource center as well. So this is the few location that I always visited. And I got my big break at the Yayasan Sabah library, the Tun Fat Library. I discover all agreement about Sembulan.
You found it at Tun Fat Library?
Yeah. I didn't believe at first, and that's actually validate the story of my grandparents, about I mean, that was very fascinating, because my grandparents keep on talking about fighting Sulu. They don't call Sulu back then. They call it Mundo. Mundo. So they say our ancestor fought Mundo, and then I say our ancestor is mercenaries. They work for the Bruneian Pangeran, and Sembulan is a place for our army, just as a caretaker. We don't own Sembulan. We are a caretaker of Sembulan.
Taking care of the well-being.
And we are an army mercenaries, They call our group as Harimau Laut, and of course, when you want to search again, the word Harimau Laut, it doesn't exist anywhere, you see?
Yeah.
But it exists in the memories of our elders, that they once fought the Mundu, and they drive the Mundu out, and then but eventually I was told they also married the Mundu, the Irano, and because all of them are sea dwellers. So part of the way for them to, stop the animosity between two tribes is to marry between this rival tribe.
Yeah.
So their children is already quite independent, so it's no longer sided which tribe. They already become mixed heritage. That answer my existence. Why I come from this multi culture, multi ethnicity background. So I start doing our genealogy research.
What does genealogy mean?
Genealogy research is like your family tree. So that is remember, that is the thing that my grandfather asked me to do, to write down all the names of our family members. Over the course of 40 years, I managed to connect more than 3,000 names from a single line. But of course, that time, if you ask me where I got all this time, why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm a banker by profession, and then my job in the bank, I'm head of credit control. Back then, credit control means the current terminology will be risk management.
Okay.
What we did in the past was like we compile all the data of our customer. When we compile the data of our customers, we convert that data into something like demography. All of them, how much they borrow, what type of car that they borrow, gender, who default the most, male or female.
So who default the most?
The male. Yeah. If the female come and apply loan, approve the loan. And then what age level of the borrower who default the most and who are prompt paymaster.
Was it like early 20s defaulters?
Mostly early defaulters, because based on our research, they spend every dime, So how can they pay their car. When they spend every dime, that's number one. Number two is they like to modify their cars. So they spend money to make the tire so big. And then they paint the car color so many color until you don't know how to describe what color of the car. But when you translate this set skill, statistic into history, it actually give a tremendous impact, because when I try translate this skill to history, the first thing I do when I want to do research is actually to create a master index. If you go to the Sabah State Archive, for example, you ask them master index. Master index is how many files existed in the Sabah State Archive. They can give you, I got 1,500 files, for example. They can answer you, but are you sure that this 1,500 file is the only file? Because based on my research, it's more than that. It's more than 6,000 over files, and it covers more than million pages of documents. So my question here is, do the information that we have is enough, sufficient, not sufficient? And when we talk about history, I just informed Avtar earlier on, history is not exclusive. History is not just for a group of people. History actually is a inclusive. It belongs to everybody. Whoever can perform three basic things. First, you can compile as many primary sources as possible, meaning your sources. You can create a proper timeline of your research, meaning from pre-colonial or post-colonial history. Then, most important thing is to become a researcher or a historian, you must have a critical mindset. Of course, Avtar also reminded me, you say, we also must be, the word that I choose, arbiters of accuracy, meaning we must speak the truth. So we shouldn't be biased about sharing history. We don't just pick and choose history that we want to share. We just share whatever our findings.
So basically, you let the history guide the story.
You need to read so many books. You need to read so many papers, so many journals. I call it triangulations. You need to compare notes. And then you must form an original idea. I never say that the current history is not sufficient. What I say is, in the event that you discover new documents, you should actually review or enhance the content of the earlier history that the predecessor already written. We don't criticize, we just actually increase the number of information. Probably when he or she did the research in the past, the document was not available. Not available because of probably back then that document was classified, and it's not available. But now, year 2024, there are thousands of files
Are
released and no longer classified, and that is a good opportunity for people like me and Mr. Avtar to do research and new material. Then probably we can look back the past in order for us to look in the future. Yes.
Interesting. So, that was Mr. Shari. Avtar, how did you get into history?
I think it starts for some children watching war movies and having an interest in war. What was it like? When you're young, you tend to think that war is glamorous and war is a good thing, and that you strive with an ambition to be a soldier or a pilot, flying a World War II aircraft and things like that. So I think it started there. I think my first exposure to history was probably a TV series called Baba Black Sheep, which they used to show. It had Robert Conrad. It was about a famous American Marine fighter squadron in the Pacific. And that always caught my eye. It was always something that was interesting to me. And then one day I went to Brunei, and I had relatives in Brunei. So for school holidays, my parents had sent me across because they just didn't want to deal with me, I think, for the holidays. So I went to my grandmother's in Brunei. My grandmother was living in Brunei. And one of the first early memories I have was of her taking me to the Brunei Museum,
Okay.
which had just opened.
What year was this?
This would have been 1980 or 1981 or 82.
All right.
It would have been earlier. It can't be 80. It can't be later than 82. It would have been 81 or 82.
early 80s,
early 80s. And the museum had just opened. If I'm correct, my memory is not wrong. I hope so.
We shall do some
and
research.
It was, I think, based on the work of Robert Nicole, a guy called Robert Nicole, who had set up the museum. And that was one of the best experiences I ever had visiting that museum, because it opened my eyes to a whole new world of things that you never get to see. We didn't have a museum in Sabah at that time that I could say. I can't remember when the Sabah Museum opened in Jesselton or Kota Kinabalu, but I don't ever remember having memories of it. But the Brunei Museum was something very different. And if you've ever been to the Brunei Museum, in the old days, in the early 80s, they had a statue directly outside the museum of Winston Churchill.
Oh.
They had a statue for a short period of time, and then it was removed later. And he was, Winston Churchill, this huge statue at the entrance. And you're just fascinated with this character, like, who is this? Who's this guy? So he's walking with a peace sign up. And I remember that even to today. It was made of bronze. So that was my early sort of exposure to history. And then during my holidays in Brunei, I watched a video called Midway, which was about the Battle of Midway. It was also another film that was based on a historical event that happened. And life being what it is, 1981, 1982, you fast forward to 2019, I'm presenting a historical talk on the Battle of Midway.
Oh, nice.
So, it's sort of a full circle. And
That's where we meet up.
yeah. And, I grew up, I was born in Jesselton, Kota Kinabalu. I grew up in Likas. And one of my early memories as a young boy, 1977, we were living in Taman Fortuna, which is nearby the Queen Elizabeth. And in those days, the infrastructure, Jalan Penampang, the new Jalan Penampang that we drive on, was very new. They had just upgraded the road. They had made a new road that linked Jalan Penampang all the way across to Damai. So they had cleared the swampland, so you could actually see, from Jalan Penampang, you could see Damai, and you could see Fosang and Borneo.
Wow.
That was my earliest memories of Luyang. Before they even built the houses, there were no houses or anything, just one shop or group of shop lots, which I believe was Borneo.
Oh, okay.
And so 1977, one early morning, I know my parents were very upset the day before. Something had happened. But you're young, you don't really know. There was some crying, some everybody was really upset. Early morning, we took a very short drive down the road to Sembulan, Sempulang. And we couldn't get in. I know we had to walk quite a ways in. And there was burial going on or something going on in the mosque. Of course, I didn't know what it is, but it was packed full of people. That's all I remember. It was just full of people. And so we carried on walking. And I remember coming to the edge of some sort of huge pond, and there was a tail of what it looked like a plane sticking out of the water. And so that was my earliest memory, and that has stuck with me ever since. When you're a young boy, these little things stay with you.
Yeah.
And that was what I saw. I remember it till today, what it looked like. And the water wasn't full. It was sort of a low tide. So you could see
The plane.
what was left of it. And there was parts of it sticking out. So, um, yeah. So fast forward, my family moved to the island of Labuan. I grew up on Labuan as a very young boy. And then at some point in time, the Malaysian education system went through a change. We had a new education minister who introduced some pretty drastic changes to the education system. And at that point in time, my parents thought it was best for my future that I go somewhere else and study. And so I was very fortunate to get a place in a school in Singapore, an international school, an English boarding school in Singapore. So I left when I was about 10 and a half years old.
This would be 1980.
84. Yeah, so I went to Singapore when I was about 10 and a half years old, or almost 11. And I grew up overseas for the most part. And I never really went back to Jesselton or Kota Kinabalu again for at least almost 20 years, I would say. 20 years? No, less. It would have been maybe about 15 years. I never went back. So I left all of it behind. Never really went to Brunei as well for 15 years. And I used to...
Where did you go for those 15 years?
Singapore.
Just in
I was
Singapore?
in Singapore for almost 6 years. I was in Australia for almost a year and a half. I was in the US for almost 6 years. 6.5 years, yeah. And then I came back. I didn't go to Labuan for that. I went to Kota Kinabalu on holiday. The intention was just a short holiday. So I came back in 96. And when I came back to Jesselton, I remember very well that this was a really nice place to be. Everybody was so friendly. And you have to remember, I didn't really come back for the longest time. So I never really had connections with anybody.
Yeah.
But people knew who I was.
12 years.
They knew from my family who I was. Oh, you've grown up and stuff. And I really enjoyed myself. I felt, and I hadn't lived at home since I was 11. I lived in boarding houses, boarding schools, and
Pretty much on your own.
yeah, I had to grow up on my own and stuff. So to cut it short, I enjoyed myself so much that I really, really didn't want to leave, but I had to go. Went back. And it was always my mind, like, God, I really like that place. I really want to go back one of these days. I wouldn't mind living there.
Was it so you decided to come back because of the people?
No, I came back because of family obligations. In those days, everything was sent by telex.
Oh, okay.
So, you could write letters. The letters would take about a month or something to get to where I was in the US. So I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and I went to a Jesuit university, which was very unusual. In the late 80s and the 90s, nobody really talked about Jesuit universities. Everybody talked about Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and Stanford. But there was something unique about the Jesuit university in the sense that a large number of the teachers that taught you were priests, Jesuit priests.
Yeah.
But they were not there to talk about religion. They were there to talk about math. They were there to talk about science. They were there to talk about political science, history, and they were just some of the most incredibly brilliant people I had ever met. Incredibly well learned, incredibly exposed. And you could sit there and listen to them, and you'd just be so inspired listening to them talk about history, for example. And so I think my love of history just grew from there. But, life being what it is, sometimes you don't always get to do the things you wish you could do. And so being somebody who loves research and history, I never got the opportunity at that point in time. Ended up doing something else in the US for 5 years. I left at the end of the contract after that 5-year period, and I got an offer to come back and work in Kota Kinabalu. The family had sent, I remember it very well, a telex had arrived one day saying, you need to come home because this is happening, and this is happening, and you really need to come and help. So it took me about 3 months to get out, to get out of what I was in at that particular period of time. Usually it takes about 6, but I managed to get it in 3 with a lot of begging and a lot of letter writing. Came back, and I came back at a very exciting time in Sabah. The Sabah football team was doing really, really well at the time.
Yes.
And so my family were involved with the Sabah team directly as a sponsor. One of my family's companies was sponsoring the Sabah team, and I remember meeting Datuk Jahim. I think he was one of the first people I met. Very nice gentleman, very pleasant, honest, very sincere person, and we're still friends even till today after 25, 26 years. But what was fascinating, and I grew up as a football player. I played a year of football in Australia, first division football, but then I realized,
First division.
yeah, I played in the Western Australian for first division. That particular year, I won Young Player of the Year. So I was thinking to myself, oh, okay, maybe I've got a future. Maybe I can be a professional. When you're young, you have these ambitions,
Yeah.
right? That you're going to be some professional player. And I grew up supporting Liverpool, and I actually got scouted. I went for a trial with a team from Scotland called Celtic. So they had a scout. So he came to watch me play a few games, and he would come and talk to me, at the end of the game, how are things? How do you feel? How are you coping with the adults, playing with the adults? They're bigger than you, physically tougher, but you have a little bit of advantage in speed and being nimble and stuff. So yeah, it's not too bad. I can cope. But, it's just not your forte. At some point in time, this is my limit. I'm not going to develop anymore. I'm not going to become this, and you have to be realistic enough to admit that. So I got an offer from the US, from Seattle University, and I was so excited because I'd always wanted to go to the US. So I left to go to this Jesuit university. So fast forward, after university, I went in, got myself signed up on a contract and committed myself to something for about 5 years. Got out of it, finished my obligations, came back because my family had needed my help. And, I came back, like I said, involved with the Sabah team, and I ended up designing some of their football kits. And I thought that was fun. That was a really fun part of it. So some of the kits, the jerseys that they wore have become iconic designs even till today. I think if you ask a lot of Sabahans, what was your favorite jersey that the Sabah team wore?
It'll be the
I'm pretty
90s.
sure two of my designs are probably up there, I think so. But anyways,
Was it the one with the 3 stripes?
there were a couple. If I see them, I know for sure which ones I did and which colors I chose as well, because I chose the colors as well. So
That's a whole different topic we have to get into.
yeah, but anyways, so I got into retail. So my job started as a retail manager for a sports company. I worked 7 days a week. And the first 4 years, I worked 7 days a week, Monday to Sunday, from 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night.
Ooh, 12 hours a day.
And that was really my commitment, was to the company, because to see it grow, and because I was just passionate. And at that particular point in time, we didn't really have anybody that I could rely on to take a lot of the pressures off me. And eventually somebody else did come in to help. And so I was able to sort of, work maybe 6 days a week or 5.5 days a week. But in the first few years,
All
it was-
hands on.
Yeah, it was just, a lot of responsibilities, but I learned a lot. Involved in organizing events, basketball tournaments for Adidas, and Puma had a street soccer tournament at that time. So, and then eventually, I decided in 2004 that the time had come for me to venture out and do my own thing. I had my own ideas about starting an enterprise and starting my own startup company, which I did. So I left. I took out 40,000 from my life insurance and used it and invested it in my new company. It took me 5 years to get the company to where I wanted, but I was focused. This is where I wanted to go. This is my vision, what I had in mind, how I was going to grow, what I was going to do. But it was it was basically me working from a small apartment on a computer and a laptop. And I was building up a brand, which eventually won awards, became internationally known. And then I came up with another idea. Well, what if I do this? I could create a new product. So I created a completely new product which eventually became a very iconic event called the TMBT Ultra Trail Marathon, which is now one of the big races in Malaysia. So I created that event and ran it for 5 or 6 years. And then at some point in time, I thought, this is it. I've reached the end. I can't do more for this anymore. And so I sold my rights to it. and left, gave up, and I took a break because I wasn't very well at that time. I think for 2 years I took a nice long break, and then I had no intention of starting to organize these events ever again, because for me I was looking for something new. What is the next thing I can get into? In the meantime, while I was doing this, I had started a small company, and the role of this company was to go and help small enterprises and small SMEs in distress, to go and study what is wrong with the particular company, what's going wrong financially or from an management sense or an operational sense, and to help them reorganize the company so they can get back to profitability. And so my first big task was actually in 2007 to come in and help a pretty big company that was in very serious distress. It took about 2 years to solve that problem, get that company out. But the thing is, it was a learning experience for me as well. And then, so over that period of time, 2004, 2005, until 2019, I've probably been involved with 4 different companies or enterprises, helping to get them to turn around. The last one was a family issue. I had to come in to help them to solve that problem. That was the last one I was involved with. But I made up my mind, 2015, 2016, that, I really cannot see myself doing this. As I get into my 50s, I want to go and do something that I've always wanted to do, which was to read history.
Okay.
To talk history, to tell history, and to study history. And so I took the summer off in 2017. I went to England. I spent the summer in England in the Imperial War Museum, looking for documents about my grandfather. He was a prisoner of war on the island of Labuan during the Second World War. We had no information about why, what, and how. So I spent time there in London looking to that and digging as much information. I didn't find everything I wanted, but I found some things which helped, gave me a little bit of an idea. Okay, so this is what transpired, this is what happened, and this is why he became sort of a prisoner at that particular period of time. He wasn't arrested in the beginning when the Japanese captured Labuan. He was arrested the year after.
Oh.
But that's still an unanswered question as to why. Why didn't they arrest him in the beginning, but they arrested him a year later? So, in the meantime, I went to visit a friend, and we went in Dorset in England, and we went to the Bovington Tank Museum. And so there was a wonderful tank display. They had brought in some of the most modern tanks from the Second World War. It was a German Tiger collection, as they called it. So they had the Tiger 1, they had the Tiger 2, they had King Tiger. I mean, they had some wonderful German tanks, and I've always been fascinated with tanks, especially German tanks.
What was the allure?
I don't know why. I've always had this allure for there's this tank, the German Tiger, it's a Tiger 1. If you ask people that love World War history, especially European war history, there's a fascination with the Tiger. For some reason, it's got this draw to it, that it's an invisible tank. It was the most superior tank in the war. Probably was. They just didn't make enough of them for a number of reasons. But there was this one tank that really caught my eye called the Ferdinand. And what was fascinating about the Ferdinand, it didn't look like any of the other tanks. It was a tank destroyer. So the shape of it and the purpose of it was completely different from the other tanks. But what really caught my eye was that it wasn't built by just anybody. It was built by the guy that founded Porsche.
Okay.
So it was a Porsche Ferdinand tank destroyer. So, and that got me really curious. So I went on and started digging for more information about this tank destroyer. Found out more history about it, how it performed in the Eastern Front against the Soviets. One summer, and it had a 10-to-1 kill ratio. It destroyed, for every 10 enemy tanks that they destroyed, they lost one, which was an amazing ratio. So again, I'm going off a little bit here, but these are the little things that sort of inspired me. So I started writing a book about it, which I haven't finished. It's still ongoing because it's just so much material to add. So, but anyways, fast forward. One day, I decided that nobody's actually organized a history symposium. Nobody's actually invited guests and talked about history. So I organized a little history session, a history symposium.
What year was this?
2019.
Yep.
2019.
So we organized our first history symposium in a little office in Penampang. So I decided to touch on the topic that I'd always wanted to touch on, which is the Battle of Midway and why it was so significant. in the Pacific War. It was a sort of the turning point of the war. And Shari presented as well.
The 300 years of documents of antiquity.
So that's the first time you guys met?
Yeah.
2019.
Well, we had met before
We
that,
met before
but this was our first collaboration.
because I don't want to share to people about my research because I want to make sure that all the info because
Is correct first.
is correct and then I want to make sure the documents is authentic and whatnot. I need to confirm, verify, and got it certified
Oh, okay.
by the National Archive before I'm ready to share it to the world. But I mean, this is a very interesting collection. I think I talk about 1 hour. But the Q&A after the talk is about 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of interest.
People had never heard about this particular topic, right?
And then thanks to Avtar, that he also protect me, him and the other speaker, because we got people fly from other parts of Sabah, and they try to actually create some sort of situation during the talk. But of course,
Why? Because they didn't believe the facts or data, or they just didn't like what was said.
I believe they are quite fascinated that we have a lot of documents.
I think they wanted to see the documents for themselves.
They want to see the document, but of course they want to copy immediately of all the documents. But of course, after asked me to go up and actually they protected. They even want to take so many things the documents now. I did bring some of the documents during the talk to show to people that we have authentic document, and this way that's how we started to share history together.
What was significant, and it is significant historically in Malaysian history, and if people will never realize this, was the very fact that for the very first time outside of our archives and our museums, Malaysians had in their possession, a Malaysian had in his possession almost every single document, every single agreement relating to North Borneo and Sabah. And now the value in it is that it tells you a story, an accurate story of the history of North Borneo and who ruled it, how they ruled it.
Who made the decisions and stuff?
It was
a lot of this information actually not private to the public. This information only exclusive to the sultans and of course the Queen of England and all those early colonial.
Why do you think it was not privy to the public in that?
Because
in that era, like that start.
It is normal. Like me, I'm working in a bank.
It's private and confidential.
Yeah, because you see, the reason why I choose agreement as my research papers, because I work in a bank, and we are exposed to all sort of agreements. You want to get a personal loan, you need to sign an agreement, which is PNC agreement. You want to buy car loan, housing loan, whatever loan that you want, there's supposed to be an agreement. So of course, when we talk about agreement, when we talk about law, we always, our Malaysia is always associated to the British law.
Yeah.
And
it's still until now, right?
Yeah, and of course, the early constitution that we have here in Sabah all written in English. So I was thinking, hey, why not? I try to source all this agreement. So this is a fundamental historical paradox that I want to share to a lot of people because actually whichever country that was ruled by a colonial they actually recorded a lot of information. Recorded. They record and they keep all this information, but yet all this information are either kept in the archive or kept at National Archive in London, and most of these documents are classified.
Until now.
So they already declassify a lot of information. But again, when I say classified, declassified, when you doesn't have a master index, you do not know which file.
You don't know where to start looking.
You do not know where to start looking. I'm looking for one thing, which is sembulan, you see. So I already very precise what I've been looking, and that document exists, the history of sembulan.
How long did it take you to find that document?
I tell you, almost 30 years until 2016. Yeah, I finally found the
How
document.
did you feel when you finally found what you were looking for?
As I told you, I don't. It's. I feel like the story of my grandparents is very
Makes
dated.
sense.
Yeah, because I always believe that they are. I believe them. But again, it's very dated. I feel very happy. Then from that lead, it grows. I try to source a lot of information. And when you say search of information, I'm quite blessed and lucky because earlier on, my grandparents, I also bequeathed to me some of their stamp collections, coin collections, and notes collection, not Borneo collection. And there is a community about numismatic philately, So I happened to join this grouping. And in terms of historical research also, they're also doing their own research about North Borneo and early Borneo history.
Okay.
Because they want to explain, okay, this is the coin.
The relevance with the coin. The stamps,
I understand. So we always have this belief, whatever things, objects or artifacts that you found in North Borneo, there must be some source of information and historical paradox again. This information is actually written. All you need to do is to search for it. So where to search for it? If you cannot find it here in Sabah State Archive, where you go after that? So this is the interesting effect. I'm actually fascinated with the adventure. You have to go there, search there, ask for people, and then ask from friends, and friends give you books, referrals. Earlier on, it was like just a copy, photocopy, and whatnot. I mean, it advanced now. As I told you, this search, this quest took me over 40 years.
For me, it was a transition. I had left the role and life that I had before. And this was what I wanted to do later in life. As I mentioned, I couldn't do it in my younger years, but I had the opportunity to do it. So I had already foreseen this is what I wanted to get into. So historical research has been wonderful for me because I enjoy it, especially topics that I enjoy. And it's a lot of reading. It's just never-ending reading and trying to understand narratives, comparing it to the narratives that exist, looking at the evidence in the documents that you have, and then trying to retell the story as accurately as possible and as honestly as possible. So,
building on that, what are you guys researching currently?
we're trying to finish. It's me now that's finishing a chapter to be included in a book on. Do we have a title for the book yet, Shari?
Yeah, the thing should be related to the Zulu claim.
Yeah, Sulu claim. So so I'm working on some recent discoveries. So I'm finishing that chapter. I've had to re-edit it 3 times, but I'm almost done.
We co-read a few articles in the.
So this is in relations to the Zulu issue.
So the funny thing with this, the Sulu, we actually never meant to get involved with research on the Sulu claim over Sabah. It's such a contentious thing. But the more we dug since 2019 up till now, the more we dug, we suddenly discovered so many facts that were missing. So many misguided, no, that's not the word, false narratives on what the real history was, that we've been able to sort of figure out what the Sabah version of history is. And that's what we've been doing. The last few years, we've been telling and retelling the correct version, the Sabah version, of what actually transpired and what the Sulu claim is. There actually is no Sulu claim if we follow the historical facts. And we've been lucky.
Yeah.
He's had access to documents, which we've been able to read in depth. We've had access to what the Bruneians have or what's in London as well. And when you put all these together,
meticulously, one by one, you piece fragmented information into one. It's fascinating.
Teaser, we're actually going to have an actual episode specifically on the Zulu claim. So we won't dig into it now. We'll tell you slowly later.
But that's what basically. So that one's supposed to be done some point in time this year. Shari has a few books coming out. I think.
I'm coming up. I already published one article about the history of Sembulan, which is quite interesting. Thank you to the Sabah Society and their panels of editors. I already published and launched. My upcoming one will be the timeline of about 2,000 years of North Borneo history. It's just a timeline.
Just a timeline. It's 2,000 years. Timeline.
2,000 years.
Yeah, but what is important about this timeline, and this will probably go into episode 2, it actually is the first time that a comprehensive book sort of covers our timeline going back so far back in time.
How far back is that the starting date?
The starting date is year 2000 years ago.
2,000 years ago, we're like
So meaning early
400.
what?
400.
My math stopped
Yeah.
working.
Because you see, we are very blessed, lucky, because in this scholarly world, the China emperor back then have recorded, they call it the Chinese annal, of which they recorded whoever came to China, visit them, and send goods to them, and countries that, and China have maps about all this eastern archipelago.
Basically, they took data and collected the data.
Yeah, and that information exists until today.
Is it accessible? Like you've. Is it publicly accessible?
Scholars have had access to
Scholars
it.
to have access.
Not us, scholars. So we're using the scholars, the references that they have, the translations from the old scripts or Chinese scripts. And they have been a very good guide, because otherwise there wouldn't really be anything we could work on. So we're very blessed with the Chinese did it.
The timeline is very important in any formation of historical story, because we also have to divide the phase of history. But, because you cannot talk history like flat line history like that. You have to divide that into early history, feudal history, and modern history. In Sabah, modern history is dated 1881.
1881.
So that is modern history. So anything below 1881, we doesn't have real history in North Borneo, because probably in 1881 the chartered company start forming,
Start doing the documentation.
The documentation. So we lost a lot of information before 1881, and Sembulan history is dated before 1881, because I still remember my grandfather say Sembulan history is 1700. I say why 1700? I say 1800 also having difficulty of understanding. I say there's no book or ever thing written 1700. My grandfather said no, 1700 our clan support the army of the Brunei, and we fought against the Mundo, and they back off.
So that's where the timeline matters.
And then he also remember the head of the army for the Mundo, which is they call it Datuk Tating, So this Datuk Tating, a lot of people confused that this is the early history, 1700, and this is where the rise of the Zulu kingdom. Again. But again, that is different topic altogether. We will touch about that subject matter. But what really important is about this research that I did. I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to share reason why it took 2019 now until 2024 to complete this, because I need to make sure the National Archive certified true copy each and every document, because I don't want people to question, Shari, how sure are you the authenticity of the documentation? Because a lot of document, this is like almost like 1,000 pages of documents, and what I did was I translate. I tried to get a copy of the translation of the agreement. Some of them are in Jawi, some of them are in Dutch, and some of the agreements in Spain. So I don't have the expertise, and I need to get access. But of course, getting to know Avtar also coming from that kind of background. Two of us study world history before we narrow down to not Borneo. So we are actually exposed to countries like India, China, Philippines, Indonesia. Earlier on we talk about Sumatra. We talk about early kingdom. So that actually will become an interesting subject to our school children to understand, especially Sabah younger generation, that they get to know what actually transpired. Or else, if we don't have this timeline, you know what actually happened? People will just
Move around.
we'll talk history. They jump into history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are very concerned that younger generation jump into history. They jump like they doesn't have any proper timeline. They jump into history. Suddenly, you will say, "Hey, Gomantong history, Madai history."
So you jumble up the flow of history
Yeah,
itself.
so they must know actually the basic who came here, when they came here, how many early kingdom was here, where all those kingdom gone. Is there any natural disaster make people migrated to North Borneo? When I say natural disaster, earthquake or volcano eruption make people move to North Borneo. So this is I think we're going to touch in future episodes.
Anyway,
a bit of a teaser.
I'm gonna wrap it up for now. So this is just an introduction to who the people are, talking about the story of our history. The next episode will dig into a little bit of how they do it, so it's not just us reading off books or creating fairy tales, but everything has a start, everything has a beginning, and we try to tell the story based on what documentations are at hand. So it's not just cakap-cakap kosong or like fairy tales. So this has been the first episode of What's the Story of Our History with Shari, Avtar, and Chris. Catch you next one.
That's the second episode.